Hi, host Eric here, host talking with famous people, and responsive fellow. I'm responding to one Nymixx 42, I believe his name is, who indicated he'd like to hear more about meta-rationalism. I'd like to talk more about meta-rationalism, so you and I are on exactly the same page there, friend. Specifically, let's start with the simple definition. Meta-rationalism is the management of a framework which both permits contradiction and disallows them in different contexts without creating cognitive dissonance or being indicative of some sort of psychological personality, character, or stage of development shortcoming. So the model basically says one starts out in kind of a pre-rational phase. One moves into mostly, which is like childhood, which isn't really so relevant for us at this point. Then one moves into an irrational phase. It's the first phase of adulthood, and the irrational phase is marked by a tolerance of contradiction in order to preserve this primacy of certain narratives. It's characterized by things like religion and or you know basically anything that doesn't require consistency of itself or finds consistency in and of itself without requiring itself to adhere to normal TI standards. So that kind of stuff is irrational worldview. The worldview that says I'm going to filter through this even when it produces contradictions because I don't require the filter to adhere to the same standards as I require other filters to adhere to. So it gets a special privilege, a special pass on wrongness. And that's irrationality. What often happens, and what adolescents and college students sometimes mistake for a destination in terms of intellect, is the rejection of irrational modalities and the replacement of them with rational modalities, namely those that are scrutiny driven. They're not so interested then in finding out what's true as they are in finding out what doesn't sustain merit. And that's where the argumentation aspect of rational thinking, reason, and such comes into play. It's basically introverted thinking or reasoning, internal logics, conditionality web management is a matter of argumentation rather than of decision making. And so the rational part period is marked primarily by a mastery of argumentation or being guided by the slopes of argumentation. Certain arguments have a much steeper slope to go up because they run afoul of certain existing things, yada yada yada. It's complicated to explain, but basically the rational period is a period of believing you're working towards finding the right arguments to explain shit. And if you master the rational period, almost nobody ever does, but if you do, then basically what that means is you can win all the arguments if you want to, and you're probably attached to a lot of positions. When I was in the rational phase, I probably didn't quite have it tapped out yet. There's probably still a little bit more room for me, but not much. I pretty much mastered rationality, the art of negating that which is claimed, and or reducing it to mush. So what's the downside of rationality? Nihilism is the rationals tend to the natural progression is to dismantle meaning of all sort and say none of it has sufficient permanence or reality to justify our adherence to it, affirmation of it, or belief. But the problem is that's a very TI heavy understanding of the world. one in which it doesn't matter what the right idea is to do. It matters whether it's correct. I understand that we like to prioritize consistency and rightness with TI, and it's a good thing to do because TE needs to be so constrained. However, we also need to realize that certain things necessitate a TE-SE kind of perspective on the world. One of those is this issue of nihilism, rationality, and irrationality. So, nihilism is what happens when you scrutinize everything. You don't have any solid ground to stand on. You have no meaning except for the meaning of the process of scrutiny and dismantling. That's all your meaning. You can attain on that level, and you hold up as a shining example of the ultimate virtue, the unwillingness to allow imperfection to stand. But of course, that's not how the world works. So you might not like the fact that people affirm religious belief in a way that seems to defy the rules of consistency checking system, TI. You say, but it doesn't check out. We can't use this. This is a bad egg. We can't use it. It doesn't check out. Well, sure, but it's not an egg. You're using an egg testing machine on that banana, and it is a bad egg because it's not an egg. It's a banana, and bananas are not very good eggs. So that's the problem with the TI approach when dealing with the irrational. If I'm telling you that I pray to an almighty God, you start launching in with the TI stuff. Here's the funny thing, is the reason TI is always beating God in arguments is because everybody's missing the point, right? That TI will say, oh, you pray to a God? So, okay, so if God exists, then wait, who said God exists? I didn't. I said I pray to an almighty God. But if you pray to something, it must exist, right? I didn't make that claim. You can make that claim if you like. But it's true though, right? I don't know. I didn't make that claim. I mean, I'm not answering it. Not I don't know. I'm not answering the question because I didn't make the claim. I don't need to defend it. I don't need to defend a claim I didn't make. Sorry. But if you're praying to God, then He must exist, right? What? But why? Who put you in charge of rules making it conditional on some affirmation of existence of something in order to do something called praying? Why do I have to do that first? Is there a mind police that comes around and makes sure I did that first, or what? I don't get it. This is meta-rationality, because what I'm saying is I'm going to engage in the behaviors of magical thinking. I'm going to engage in some of the frameworks of magical thinking as a means of bridging the gap between intuition and logic. Intuition tells me the world functions as it functions. Intuition tells me, I don't know why, but right there, yeah. Intuition tells me now's the time, or now's not the time, or whatever. Intuition tells me this is a good thing, I should grab it. If it's too hard to grab, intuition tells me, fuck it, grab something else. But there's not good reasons for these things. Not really. We can come up with good stories to justify them. We can come up with good stories to explain why we did them even. Do those stories accurately represent why we actually did them? Not really. They represent an approximation or in a way in which we can process the event into our respective narratives, more importantly. And that's a good thing to do. But it doesn't actually explain why it is we did something. Probably, we don't know why we did it. It just would have played out that way. And then we shape it after the fact. If you're an ENTP, that's how it goes. Now, ENTJs may be able to tell you very clearly why they did something. Maybe executing a plan. But of course, taking that approach to reality means that you can't do this. And you can't be me. You can't be an ENTP and also be planny. They're you can't be me. You can't be extrovert intuition. You can't be any other ENTP if you are planny. If you're planny, then your brain is accustomed to spending its time doing planning, and as a consequence, it's then spending time executing the plan. My brain is accustomed to spending the time making up the plan and the thing simultaneously as I go. Much more efficient. Much less precise, but much more efficient. So, in that regard, extrovert intuition is like TE, and introverted thinking is kind of in contrast with it and causes it problems. So, anyhow, the meta-rational is one then who has bridged that contradiction with a meta framework. One that says, I will use some frameworks in certain conditions, other frameworks in other conditions. I can reference multiple frameworks under a single condition, and then make further judgment upon seeing what they have to say. I have to acknowledge that whatever frameworks I use to understand something, whatever frameworks I use to argue something, that's not why I'm actually doing shit. And that the reason why I'm actually doing shit is kind of a mystery that I'll probably never get to know the answer to. I suspect that it's so much of a confluence of things that it's impossible to narrow causally down to a reason for things regarding just about anything. But I'd also posit that the need to causally reduce something to a reason is much less significant than the need to proactively define identity narratives with your reasons. And so that's where the focus should be. And that's why I ascribe to meta-rationalism as a modality instead of rationalism, or of course irrationalism, or childhood, non-rational. I mean, I guess, yeah, it goes non-rational, irrational, rational, I suppose. Anyway, and then meta-rational. I'd also add that if you want to talk about leadership qualities, in my mind, what makes somebody fit to lead a group are a couple of things. One, meta-rationality. Two, core confidence, meaning an embrace of vulnerability and of accountability. Three, I would argue, is a prioritization of negation for group policy. That is to say, first we negate all that fails to meet up to the minimum standard, which is high, and we don't question we don't try to even fix shit that we negate because it's we can come back with it reinvented, reborn, but not we don't try to fix shit that doesn't meet the minimum criteria. And we know what those minimum criteria are through TI. We have to have group leadership be run by TI because group leadership needs to, first and foremost, do no harm. Ideally, all of human agency would operate under the principle of the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, first and foremost, meaning do no lasting harm. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean you can't do something that stings if you're a doctor. Oh, don't insert him with that needle. It'll sting. It'll do him harm. That's not the harm. That's not the measure of harm, right? So I may smack some people down occasionally in ways that are actually helpful, but it makes them sting. And then other times I might smack people down in ways that are actually harmful, and I shouldn't do it. And so a good leader is going to have to be able to be very particular about knowing those lines and walking them precisely and taking accountability anytime he missteps and trying to make right that whatever damage he may have done in the process. So basically, what I'm saying about a leadership kind of role in life, it requires one to be meta-rational, to be fit to lead, in my opinion. It requires one to be meta-rational, core confidence. It requires a prioritization of negation over affirmation. Again, in that capacity, not in other capacities in life, not in all capacities. And then the last thing is it should be run upon, and it should be the individual who's displaying these three things should be actually other focused, not like me and 99.9999999% of the people who's driven to the core, first and foremost, beyond all else, by self-interest of some sort or another. And one might argue that everybody is. I kind of agree that everybody is, but I actually think, and I don't think this person exists. I don't think this person. Maybe like Jesus was this person or something. But to be successful at being really fit to lead, you need to additionally have a genuine